Welcome to Profiling in the Court. This is the second part of the Derek Chauvin trial videos I'm going to do. I really wasn't going to do this video right now. I was going to wait a little later in the trial to discuss anything else. But after I put out the last video where I analyzed the issue of the cause of death, that there actually wasn't any listed cause of death, and that in order to have someone be convicted of homicide, they have to have caused the death of another person. And that evidence isn't there. The autopsy simply says his heart failed, which is a mechanism of death. It doesn't say exactly what caused his heart to fail. I discussed in that last video that the agitated delirium that George Floyd exhibited from using drugs, he was highly paranoid. He was very, very agitated, very full of strength. He was paranoid. In that state, your temperature can rise, and then your heart can go into arrhythmia, and that can kill you. We do not know whether, if George Floyd had gotten into the police vehicle, whether he would have died in the back seat just from sitting there, because by that time he was so agitated, his heart was failing. As a matter of fact, he said, "I can't breathe," before he was on the ground. So he already felt he couldn't breathe. And so to me, it seemed very clear that he was already in this agitated delirium that was causing his body to crash, his heart to fail. And he probably would have died regardless of whether he was on the ground and in handcuffs and had Derek Chauvin's knee on his neck area. The problem was there's no listed cause of death. I believe it was the agitated delirium. And the prosecution wants to say that the death was caused by Derek Chauvin. But in reality, if there's no cause of death, how can you say he killed him? You cannot. You cannot say he killed George Floyd, because even if you think, oh, it looks like it, it's not proof. And so there you have the problem. So I explained that in my last video, and I've gotten a lot of very negative commentary from people who said, don't you see with your own eyes what happened? Can't you see that man was murdered? There were people paraded into the court just saying over and over, I saw him die, I saw him murdered, I saw him murdered, I saw him murdered. And this is prejudicing the jury in a horrible way, because they're not giving evidence. It's just an emotion fest that the prosecution is putting on to sway the jury, which I personally think there should have been an objection to, and that shouldn't have been allowed, because it wasn't giving any evidence or facts. It was just telling the jury what some people in the area felt, which we've been seeing for the last year. I'm sure the jury's been seeing how people felt for the last year as well. So what we come down to is the problem that I do not, personally, I see the problem of this trial is he should never have been charged with homicide, because there was never proof of a homicide. There was never proof of a cause of death, and therefore you can't charge somebody with homicide when they didn't cause you can't prove how they caused the death. So here is what I think he should be. The charge that was reasonable was this one, and I'm going to read it to you, because this can be very clear here. Second-degree manslaughter. What is it? In order to convict Chauvin of second-degree manslaughter, prosecutors will need to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he was culpably negligent and took an unreasonable risk with Floyd's life when he restrained him, and his actions put Floyd at risk of death or great harm. Prosecutors do not have to prove that Chauvin's actions intended to cause Floyd's death, only that his actions put Floyd at a risk of death or great bodily harm. This charge carries a presumptive sentence of 41 to 57 months. Now, let me look back at this. Okay. Did he take an unreasonable risk with Floyd's life? Well, it depends. If Chauvin understood that a person who was in an agitated delirium from drugs would be in a more compromised position if he were in a prone position on the ground, if he knew that staying there in that prone position sometimes does contribute to the death of people in agitated deliriums, more than it does on people who don't have that. In other words, if you put a regular person who is not on drugs, you just put them on the ground, they don't tend to die off while they're laying down there. That's very rare. But people with agitated deliriums they tend to die when you do that. But the problem is, you don't actually know if they would have died if you didn't do that. So I think the proof even of that is a little shaky. However, if through the training, if Chauvin got training that stated that agitated delirium, if a guy's in agitated delirium, try to keep him off the ground. Try not to put him in a prone position. If you do have to put him in a prone position, make it as quick as you can make it, so that he doesn't have his chest compressed more, so that he can't take in as much oxygen when he's already losing oxygen because of his state and his heart failure. If Chauvin received this training, and it was part of the Minneapolis Police Department's training, and he already knew this, and he said, okay, hey, Floyd's, he's obviously taking drugs. He's obviously in agitated delirium, but I don't give a hoot. I'm going to put him down on the ground because he's a problem, and I'm going to keep him there till he stops fighting us. Okay. Then what he did, he's probably took an unreasonable risk. Even if the prone position wouldn't necessarily cause Floyd to die any more than his already agitated state would have done it. If it increased that risk by 1%, 2%, 5%, well, I guess it's better not to put him on the ground. So if Derek Chauvin knew that putting him in a prone position might compromise him a little bit, perhaps he shouldn't have done that. Also, at the end, when Floyd stopped moving, there was a point where he was likely really already dead. And so even if Chauvin took his knee off and then rolled him on his side, it might not have improved anything because he was already not breathing. But since he didn't exactly know that, it seems like his actions or his inaction to do that could have contributed in some way to Floyd's death, or put him at a higher risk of dying at that moment if he wasn't already dead. Okay, so that to me is negligent. And when he didn't give him CPR, okay, so the ambulance was on the way, but maybe if he started CPR, maybe Floyd would have a chance. Maybe, even if it's a small one, maybe you could call that negligence. So those actions and inactions, in my opinion, do look like they could support a second-degree manslaughter charge. Now, I don't see what the issue with that is. I think that if that's what he receives, he's already lost his job as a police officer. He's already a pretty well-hated man. Chauvin also would have to spend time in prison, and I think that would be perfectly reasonable. I have a feeling if that's what the jury finds for the verdict, that he's guilty of second-degree manslaughter and not homicide, all hell is going to break loose, because the people are out there saying what they said to me. Don't your eyes show you that he was murdered? And this jury, how could they say he was not murdered? How could they lessen it to that little bit of just a little slap on the wrist? How could they do that? It's going to be really, 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 really bad across the country. And I just want to point out one thing before I end this video. One of the problems we're having with national TV these days is that, across the country, in 50 states, over every day of the year, somebody does something. Well, they screw up, or they do something wrong, or you get one guy out there who just doesn't do his job right, or maybe he's a jerk, or maybe he's callous, or maybe he's got, who knows what his issues are. Maybe he is a bad guy. So somewhere in Idaho, you have a doctor who sexually assaults a patient. Once upon a time, that would have been a local issue. And the local people could come out and say, hey, we want to do something about this doctor. We want the prosecution to get him, they want him to be prosecuted. Maybe we're concerned about the doctors in this area. Are they allowing doctors to practice who are getting away with these things? But when you take one incident in one state, and then now it's not just Idaho, now it's the entire country, and everybody's going to protest everywhere in the country because one person did something not so great in one place. It's not that an incident can't be bad, but when it's exaggerated as if this is every single police officer does these horrible things, and this one incident shows how bad it really is. No, it doesn't. It shows one incident. Because if you look at all professions, There are teachers who do bad things. There are anesthesiologists who have been known to be serial killers, that they've killed off a number of patients in their field. I mean, you have literally in every field, you've got some creepy person or some negligent person or whatever. And of course, we should address these things. I'm not saying we shouldn't. We should address each one of these things as to how people get qualified and how there is some kind of, are people paying attention to what they're doing? Is there any kind of program that prevents these things? I mean, are you part of an association? Does the association do anything about these things? Is there any oversight of any sort? And with police departments, is there good citizen oversight as well in each local jurisdiction? And then can we talk about training? Can we talk about this? Can we talk about that? I don't object to all of those things. And I think we have to have discussions about those things. But when you take an isolated incident and you put this on, everybody videos it, and then it goes national, and it goes on of course, the media just pumps it up and pumps it up and pumps it up to the point where it's impossible to have a fair trial. I don't see how this is going to be a fair trial. That just seems outrageous to me, because first of all, the jury's probably seen everything that's ever been out there for a year, and they're probably still going to hear things even when they go home because they weren't sequestered. And then they have to fear, if we don't convict him, if we don't come down and say he's guilty of the worst of the charges, Minneapolis is going to burn in how many other cities? And when they find out who we are, oh my God, what is going to happen to us? I don't know what I would do if I'm on that jury. Well, I do. I would do the right thing. I would listen to the evidence and analyze the evidence and live with the results, because I won't do what is not correct, and I wouldn't give a verdict that wasn't based on the evidence. But since emotions are playing so huge everywhere, and the jury seems to be very emotional about this too, are they going to really be able to say, okay, let's look at the evidence. Is there proof do we even know what the cause of death is? Is there proof that George Chauvin really caused the death of George Floyd, or was he negligent? Was some of his actions and inactions, that's supported with second degree manslaughter? And can we find that to be reasonable and go with that? Or if that isn't even proven in court, can we just say he's not guilty of anything? Can they actually ignore what's going on outside that courtroom? Can they really do that? And I personally think it's going to be amazing if they actually render a verdict based on the evidence. Because from where I'm sitting and the things I'm getting, the reactions I'm getting to even my first video is astounding. I'm getting called all kinds of names because how dare I say these things when I should know, especially as a criminal profiler, this was murder. What's wrong with me? And what kind of person am I? And so if I'm receiving that, my God, just think what that jury feels who's sitting in that courtroom. But I will stand by, as of this point in time, I find that the only reasonable verdict I would come up with at this time would be second degree manslaughter. I would go home comfortable with that because that is what I see at this point in time. Maybe by the end of the trial, maybe the defense could convince me there is no second manslaughter there either. I don't think he's going to do it, but I think I still have to wait till the end of the trial to see what evidence he presents. Some kind of evidence that, I don't know, he never received such training, that he's not supposed to let the guy out of his control, that he's not supposed to administer CPR when the ambulance is on the way. I don't know what the defense has to say. So we'll have to wait to the end of the trial to know what all the evidence is that's going to be presented both by the prosecution and the defense. But I will say at this point, it looks to me like second degree manslaughter and not homicide. Thank you very much for being here tonight, and I'll see you probably somewhere near the end of the trial with a part 3, my final conclusions on the case. Thanks for being here. Bye-bye.